Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. We are watching the White House, where President Trump is expected to welcome Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu any moment now. We're going to keep an eye on that. Now, this all comes as Trump issues a new ultimatum to China on tariffs, as we see big swings from the major indices on Wall Street, and millions reeling from the deadly storms that unleashed historic flooding, where the system is headed next. We'll show you coming up. But first, markets continue to tumble as Trump doubled down on his sweeping tariff agenda. The president made new threats against China on social media just hours ago. Those threats include an additional 50% tariff against that country. Now, that Truth Social post reads, quote, "If China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8th, 2025, the United States will impose additional tariffs on China of 50% effective April 9th. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated." All right, CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes has the very latest from the Trump administration. But first, I want to bring in CBS News senior business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent. Jolene, thank you so much for being with us. Markets in China closed right now. How do you see this latest announcement from Trump playing out over the day?
It looks like it's going to continue to be volatile and very challenging for investors because there's so much uncertainty out there. A lot of folks are just following what is happening hour by hour, even minute by minute. But we do know that in terms of how much you pay for consumer goods, that is really what matters to not only consumers, but small businesses as well, right? And we have some new information from Oxford Economics that shows that the average retail price of goods could go up by about 10%, which of course would be a really challenging additional amount of money to pay for goods, especially after such a long sustained period of stubborn inflation, higher interest rates, and of course, just coming out of that pandemic 5 years ago. So the overall situation for small businesses, what we're hearing is because there's so much uncertainty, it's been difficult to figure out what to do, to how to absorb the costs of these tariffs. And so that uncertainty continues to play out and create that volatility that you're seeing often, much of it today, once again in the red.
So, Jolene, what would it take to sort of stabilize Wall Street, at least the remainder of the week? I mean, more tariffs are coming. That's only going to impact the economy even more, right?
Yeah, and we're also getting additional data, economic data. Sure, it was from last month prior to the tariffs hitting, but we're going to get more producer price index data as well as inflation data. That is likely to be more market sensitive, if you will, going forward. But the idea here is businesses, investors, consumers, everyone wants certainty. And we're basically getting the opposite of that right now from the White House as the situation evolves. And so even though President Trump is saying, look, in the long term, he hopes to bring back jobs in terms of manufacturing, right now, the short-term impact is not just on your portfolio, but it is in the sense of how people are spending, softening consumer confidence, things like that impacting the market writ large.
And a lot of folks are sitting at home wondering, what do I do with my money? Should I be investing? Should I be selling? What should people be doing?
It's interesting. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink today saying at the New York Economic Club that, maybe this is a buying opportunity if you're trying to get some good value on some of those more expensive stocks out there. But overall, if you're thinking about your 401k, your retirement, you just want to think about the long term. Ride this out. Historically, the S&P 500 has made gains of 7 to 10% on an annual basis. So if you sit and you don't move anything, you don't take, any risk in terms of, paying additional fees to get cash out, just hold on and stay calm. But it is a different matter for people who are currently retired right now, who are drawing on some of these assets. It is definitely a very stressful and difficult time. But overall, as we look at it, if you are holding, typically, historically, you end up still winning.
Okay, so if you can, hold on. But it is stressful. That's probably the understatement of the century for a lot of people right now. All right, Jolene Kent, thank you so much. All right, let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, great to be with you. Remind us of how we got to this point with China and these tariffs, and what's at stake here for the White House?
Well, first the president imposed 20% tariffs on China. And then the other day, he announced that he was going to add 34% on top of that. That's how you got to 54%. And then unsurprisingly, China decided to retaliate. They say, hey, you're putting an extra 34% tariff on our goods. We'll put a 34% tariff on yours. And then today, the inevitable escalation by President Trump, who had threatened to do exactly this if any countries responded to his tariffs. Now he says he's adding another 54% tariff to Chinese goods starting on Wednesday. Liz, I was interviewing a small business owner who has a comic book store about a mile away from here on Friday, and he imports a lot of his goods from China primarily, also Canada, and he says he doesn't really have alternatives. All of the books that he sells, whether they are graphic novels or comic books, they are printed in China and Canada. So for someone like him, suddenly staring 104% tariffs in the face, most of which will be passed along to him, he has to then decide how much of that he's going to eat, how much he'll pass on to his customers. It is incredibly stressful.
Yes.
And so the question is this a threat? Is this something the president will back down from eventually? We simply don't know right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, Nancy, because the president repeatedly said that negotiations over these tariffs are out of the question. But then he seemingly softened his stance today in a Truth Social post about Japan. What more do we know about that?
Right. He said that there was a top tier group of Japanese negotiators heading here to Washington to discuss the new tariffs on their country, and that he is open to talking. And I have to tell you, this has been one of the biggest frustrations for lawmakers, for the business community. No one seems to understand where exactly Trump stands, where his administration stands when it comes to negotiations. Over the weekend, a lot of his top economic advisors were out there talking about this, and we got differing messages from all of them, whether it was Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick or the president's trade advisor, Peter Navarro. And I think the reason that they aren't all on the same page is that the president himself has been changing his mind about whether he wants to engage in negotiations or not, and how soon. And so they're trying to speak for him, but they're struggling to do so.
And meanwhile, Nancy, as you can see, there's a lot of activity going on behind you, because any moment now, President Trump is set to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They're going to walk through those doors at sometime during this hour. They are set to hold their second face-to-face meeting since Trump started his term. And there's a lot of things to discuss, Nancy, everything from tariffs, of course, to the Israel-Hamas conflict. What are we expecting to come out of today's meeting?
Well, this will kind of be a test case for whether the president actually is open to negotiating on tariffs, because he slapped a 17% tariff on Israeli goods. That really took the Israelis by surprise, because they, in anticipating these tariffs, had actually dropped all of their tariffs on U.S. goods. They thought that that would cause them to be safe. It did not. So Netanyahu has been engaged in lower level conversations with other White House officials. Now he's going to be sitting down with the president. So we'll see what comes of the conversation today. But it is not going to be a conversation solely about tariffs by any means. There's so much to discuss. Iran, and of course, the end of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, which has taken place, and now the fighting has resumed. Israel has imposed a blockade on aid into Gaza, and that has had significant effects as well. They say they're doing that to up the pressure on Gaza to release more hostages, but things are not going the way that President Trump had envisioned. So we'll see what comes of conversations about that here at the White House as well.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that press conference later on today. Nancy Cordes, thank you so much. Well, the Trump administration's legal battle over a man deported by mistake is now headed to the Supreme Court. The Justice Department filed an emergency appeal today, asking the highest court to block a court order to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a supermax prison in El Salvador. Now, over the weekend, a federal judge issued a scathing order to bring him back, calling his deportation a grievous error. So let's bring in CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, now that the case is in the hands of the high court, what happens to the deadline to return Abrego Garcia?
that deadline is still in place. So as of 11:59 tonight, as of the time we're talking here at 1 o'clock on the East Coast, the United States is still required by this Maryland federal judge's order to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to the United States. Obviously, it's very likely that the Supreme Court could chime in before then, but otherwise, then the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals denied in a 3-0 decision against the Department of Justice a Trump administration appeal in which they argued that there's no way that they can bring him back, besides the fact that we know from other court cases that it is possible to bring people back, as 9 people estimated have been brought back from this CCOT prison in El Salvador.
And Jake, the team at 60 Minutes learned that another man taken to that same Salvadoran prison in the middle of seeking U.S. asylum. What do we know about this individual?
Yeah, his name is Andre Hernandez Romero. He was part of, same as Mr. Abrego Garcia, the series of 3 flights that left the United States on March 15th. 2 of those planes are at the center of that lawsuit with Judge James Boasberg when he ordered them to turn around. Mr. Hernandez Romero is a gay man who sought to come to the United States to seek refuge and seek asylum from what he says was persecution in his home country. And he claimed, at least in the first batch of immigration and asylum hearings, that he would be in danger of potentially going back to Venezuela. He has tattoos on his arm, which the government alleges, as they have in many other cases this 60 Minutes reporting showed, that there is some gang affiliation, except it has his mom and dad written on the inside of his arms with a king and with the 2 crowns on the inside of his arms. And we really know that the United States, in the way they did this, clearly was flawed. We've heard it from multiple judges at this point that by rushing people onto these planes, people's due process laws were violated, including Mr. Abrego Garcia's, 2 courts have now found. And that by just simply putting these people on the planes by alleging that they have either tattoos or social media posts that potentially tie them to these gangs, they're now there and they have to find a way to sue to get out of there, which we know across all these lawsuits has been so difficult. The United States has continued to argue that there's no way to bring people back. And we have not seen the White House even acknowledge any effort to even reach out to the Salvadoran government to start these kind of conversations about returning people who at least have not been convicted of being gang members, nor has there been real concrete evidence that they are, even not in a court of law, but in an immigration court, actually gang members.
All right, Jake Rosen, thank you so much, live for us in Washington. Well, the storms that have wreaked havoc across the South and Midwest have now turned deadly. We're on the ground in Arkansas, where the only way to escape the homes impacted by these storms was by boat. You're watching CBS News 24/7. In Brooklyn, New York, 4 girls between the ages of 8 and 16 are recovering from stab wounds. Police say an 11-year-old girl called 911 Sunday saying that her uncle stabbed her sisters. Police found a man refusing to drop his meat cleaver when they rushed to the scene. He would not drop the knife, so police shot him. He's in critical condition. All 4 girls are expected to survive. To Phoenix now, where opening statements are starting today in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell. She's the mom already convicted of killing her 2 children in Idaho over her extreme religious beliefs. Today, prosecutors will argue she conspired with her brother to kill her 4th husband in 2019. Now, she isn't a lawyer, but has chosen to represent herself in that trial. A Pennsylvania police officer is recovering in the hospital after being shot on the job. It happened last night in Pottstown, about 40 miles away from Philadelphia. Police responded to a car crash, which then turned into a standoff at a home lasting for hours. The suspect was later taken into custody after shooting at the officers and then hitting one of them in the shoulder. We know the injured officer is in stable condition and is expected to be okay. House Speaker Mike Johnson has an uphill battle this week. He's looking to rally House Republicans around the budget bill passed by the Senate over the weekend. Now, this resolution is dubbed the blueprint to unlocking President Trump's legislative agenda. That agenda includes tax breaks, border funding, and energy policy. But a number of House Republicans say they will vote against this bill. Let's get right to CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small. Torian, why are the Republicans not on board with this?
Yeah, so Liz, what's interesting about this is these are some pretty significant Republican points that they were looking for. It potentially is a major victory for Donald Trump if this can get through both chambers. That's because this includes about $175 billion for border security, $150 billion for the military. The biggest issue, though, among Republicans, those fiscal hawks on the House side, is this $5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling. A lot of Republicans, including Chip Roy, who's a very vocal member of the House Freedom Caucus, says that this is a pretty large bill with not enough pay-fors built inside this. In fact, Representative Arrington, who's the chair of the House Budget Committee, said that this is pretty ridiculous and that he wouldn't be supporting it either. The lucky number or unlucky number is 3. That's a number of Republicans the House could afford to lose on this bill. If more than that happens, that means this is pretty much dead on arrival once it hits the House floor.
And Torian, there's also a push in Congress to allow remote voting for new parents. We've been reporting on this all last week, and it's reported now that a deal has been made. What do we know?
Yeah, Representative Paulina Luna, who was the lead negotiator for this bill, she's the biggest proponent and really the first Republican to back this push, came forward and said that she had a conversation with not just the White House, but House Speaker Johnson as well, and said that the solution could be allowing new mothers who has a physical emergency that would pretty much stop them from getting to the Hill to vote. This would only set up for them to be able to vote by proxy. This still, though, would require some Democrat buy-in, and considering that this would significantly change the language and limit the scope of this bill, it's uncertain whether or not there are Democrats that will support this. Considering, again, even with these concessions, Republicans at large are not on board with this, seemingly also including Speaker Johnson, who she claims, Representative Luna claims, that he is supportive of this, but he has yet to say whether or not he would endorse that type of legislation.
And also happening where you are today, Torian, some recently fired DOJ officials are on Capitol Hill. What are we expecting to hear from them?
Yeah, very busy day on the Hill as usual, but this is, I should note, what's considered a shadow hearing. Democrats don't have the authority, considering they're in the minority in both chambers, to convene these congressional business. So this is done in an unofficial way that would allow for people to come in and testify about what they're seeing as the impacts or consequences to Trump's very sweeping mass layoffs across agency, including quite a few folks laid off from the DOJ. They're here to lay out the case against Trump, against Doge, against Elon Musk, and Democrats are looking to provide them with a speaker or a soapbox to stand on to speak about it.
All right, we'll be watching. Torian Small, always busy where you're at. Good to see you. All right, severe weather in the South and Midwest is being blamed for killing at least 20 people, causing heavy rains and historic flooding. CBS News correspondent Dave Malkoff reports from northeastern Arkansas, where he saw firsthand how evacuation by boat was the only option for many people.
We're standing here on the banks of the Black River here in Pocahontas, Arkansas, but let me show you exactly where the Black River should be. You see that tree line back there? That is basically the bank of the Black River. All of the stuff in front of it, all this moving water, that's all flood water. And that's why we were with a team yesterday from Nebraska Task Force 1. They were a team of 45 people that came 8 hours from home to here in Pocahontas to stage and help the Pocahontas Fire Department and the Sheriff's Department in any kind of rescues that they would need. Yesterday, we were out on a boat with them, and we went out to see a levee. There is a levee that protects the area that is underwater right now from some residents who live on the other side of that levee. They wanted to make sure that that was intact. They have engineers with them, the same kind of engineers that would look at levees from the the Army Corps of Engineers, and they went over there and just plotted it out to make sure that the levee was okay. Then we got a call from the Sheriff's Department to check out a house that was underwater, but that house was cleared. That is the kind of thing that is happening in this region right now. We were driving around yesterday trying to get to Pocahontas, and the GPS kind of meandered us off track because there were so many flooded roads, and we ended up on gravel roads that were flooded over. We had to turn around and go the other way, and that's what people are running into, not only here but also over in Tennessee and throughout the region, because this water behind me, the Black River specifically, will not crest till Wednesday, and then the water will stick around for the rest of the week. Dave Malkoff, CBS News, Pocahontas, Arkansas.
All right, let's take you now to Kentucky, where neighborhoods are just underwater. The flooding there causing another crisis for residents. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call following this story from our newsroom. Chanel, what can you tell us about the flooding?
Well, Liz, some dramatic images coming into our newsroom this hour from Kentucky. I want to show you what we're looking at. These images, by the way, coming to us from our local station, WLKY. What you're looking at here is a live shot of Carroll County, Kentucky. This area is now under an evacuation order because of all this flooding. Take a look here. So much of this area right now is underwater because of those floods. The mayor says that this is expected to be a high impact event, also calling this a life-threatening emergency. Meantime, Liz, I also want to talk about another neighboring neighborhood, Harrodsburg, which is about an hour and a half south of Carroll County. We know at this point that flood levels there have reached 1.5 feet of the city's raw water station on the Kentucky River. This is a big problem. By midnight last night, the plant was essentially forced to stop pumping, and the pumps there are still not back up and running right now. So the city is asking people there to conserve water because supply is limited right now during all of this active weather. I'm actually told, Liz, that Mercer County could run out of water by tonight.
Wow, that is so scary. And this area just not getting a break from these storms. I want to bring in Zoe now. Thank you, Chanel. You know, what's made this storm so dangerous is that it just hasn't moved.
Exactly.
It's just stayed right there and just continued to pound the area with rain, tornadoes.
Yeah, it's what's called a stationary front. And since April 1st, the first day of the month, it's now April 7th, just to show you how long that system's been sticking around, it is finally beginning to move its way east. So that stationary front is getting a little more movement into it, and it's making its way across the eastern coast of the United States. It's still bringing the threat for severe weather. It's still going to bring an additional 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. But the places in Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee that got slammed with that rain, it is making its way off and away, and much drier conditions are going to be moving in over the next 24 hours. As you can see, that storm system will continue to make its way off the coast of the United States, but in its wake, much colder air will be moving in. Unfortunately, as the system makes its way east, it is going to be bringing us the potential for severe weather. Let's break down some of the details on what we can expect over the next, again, several hours, because we are currently looking at widespread flash flood warnings. Those areas in red right now, those are flash flood warnings. Look at all the river levels that are currently above that major flood stage. Again, that will continue throughout this afternoon and evening. There's also flood watches that are in effect as that storm system will continue to make its way over Georgia, again, bringing an additional 1 to 3 inches of rain, especially from Georgia up to South Carolina and throughout North Carolina and the Virginia border. That's where the heaviest rain is likely going to fall. Maybe a little bit of flooding on those roadways in places that have already seen a lot of rain. But the bigger impact over the next several hours is definitely going to be tornadic activity. There was a confirmed tornado in the Texas Panhandle near Tallahassee, and there is going to be more potential of tornadic activity over the next several hours, as again, this storm system will continue to make its way farther east. If there is any good news, though, it is going to be a quick mover. It is finally going to be making its way off the coast, and as it does so, much drier, much quieter weather building in on the back end of that system. But Liz, the biggest threat with this system now as we step out tonight, not only the severe weather across the southeast, but freezing temperatures that will be coming in on the back end of it. So all the water that's on the ground right now, it's going to freeze over overnight tonight. So it's going to be a very slippery early morning commute tomorrow for a lot of Americans.
The extremes. It's just remarkable.
It is that weather whiplash. It's the time of year, the spring season.
All right, Zoe, thank you so much. Well, coming up, all eyes on the White House today as President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meet face to face. Tariffs and another potential ceasefire all on the table. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Just moments ago, President Trump welcomed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there to the White House, and they announced this last-minute visit in order to talk tariffs, Iran, and of course the war in Gaza. Our very own CBS News correspondent Chanel Call joins us now from the newsroom. Chanel, you've been following this story. What can we expect today?
And I want to show you more of that video, Liz, because we heard reporters sort of shouting questions at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he pulled out of that vehicle and before he walked into the White House. He did not answer any of those questions. Do we have that video lined up? Yeah. OK, so take a look at this. You can see the two shaking hands. President Trump welcoming Netanyahu to the White House this hour. Notably, Liz, this will be the second time President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are meeting face to face since Trump took office. And you mentioned this, two big topics sure to be discussed today, Gaza and tariffs. Netanyahu, we can tell you, was just in Hungary before this. And when he was there, he had a discussion about what was going to be talked about today with President Trump. He said it will focus on hostages, quote, achieving victory in Gaza, and of course, tariffs. He also said that he has a, quote, special personal link with President Trump. Also want to mention the two were meant to hold a joint press conference in the East Room this afternoon. We are now being told that press conference has been called off.
All right, CBS News correspondent Chanel Call, thank you so much for that update. All right, let's bring in CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd. Sam, thank you for being with us to help us break down what's going to go on between these two gentlemen today. As this meeting gets underway, the war in Gaza is escalating. The last time these two leaders met, Trump spoke of the U.S. taking over Gaza and potentially turning into some kind of resort. Is that still likely to be on the agenda?
I think anything is on the agenda when it comes to President Trump's approach to Gaza. We know that in recent days, recent weeks, Prime Minister Netanyahu has, quote, switched gears in Gaza. The ceasefire and hostage release deal that had been in place in the last few days of the Biden administration expired. Israel resumed its military campaign in Gaza. Israel cut off humanitarian assistance to Gaza, as well as the last remaining bit of energy. And since that time, Israel has said that it would start seizing more territory. It is unclear whether Israel is saying that it plans to permanently keep that territory or if that is part of its military operations to try to push Hamas back to the negotiating table. So we should expect every option to be on the table for Gaza as Prime Minister Netanyahu meets with President Trump as we speak.
And we're hearing other countries respond to what's going on over there. I mean, French President Emmanuel Macron called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza during a recent visit to Egypt. Any insights into how these two leaders will address that, given the continuing escalation of the conflict? Are they feeling the pressure from these other countries?
Well, they may be feeling pressure from other countries, but there is the reality that U.S. negotiators and Israeli negotiators have said that Hamas is refusing to come to the table to negotiate in good faith. So while there is certainly a lot of very necessary attention on Israel's offensive in Gaza and the horrific conditions on the ground, it also remains the case that Hamas has failed, according to the United States and Israel, to come to the table in a meaningful way to negotiate for the final release of hostages and for some sort of framework to end this war. Now, there are sticking points between the sides that Hamas is saying are the reasons why they have not come back to the table, including Israel's insistence that Hamas leave governing Gaza to some other party. And Hamas has said that that is a non-negotiable from their perspective.
And also on the agenda today, Sam, is Iran and its nuclear program. I mean, Trump threatened to bomb if Iran refuses to make a deal. What is Netanyahu likely to push for from Trump on Iran?
Well, interestingly, I've been in meetings with Prime Minister Netanyahu during the Obama administration when the subject of Iran was top of the agenda. And based on that experience, I would imagine that Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing two things. One, urging President Trump to ensure that Israel's kept in the loop on any plans for direct or indirect negotiations with Iran, as well as any plans to engage in some sort of military escalation with Iran. Israel wants a seat at the table with the United States so that they're in the loop on anything pertaining to Iran. Concurrently, in my experience, Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to ensure that the Trump administration understands the existential threat that Iran poses to the state of Israel, and that the United States will not allow Iran to continue indefinitely marching towards a nuclear weapon. Those are the two tracks that Prime Minister Netanyahu used to raise during the Obama administration when we were discussing Iran.
One last question. I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between Israel and the U.S. because we just saw these recent tariffs that Trump imposed on Israel, the 17% tariffs. Is that going to impact at all their conversations today and our relationship with Israel?
I would imagine that we will reach some kind of deal with Israel. The United States has had a free trade agreement with Israel for 40 years that covers, I believe, about 98% of bilateral trade between the two countries. Prime Minister Netanyahu met with Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick yesterday and is likely working to hammer out relief from that 70% tariff rate in light of the I believe it's about $7 billion or so trade deficit that the United States has with Israel. So I would expect some sort of trade deal to be put on the table, and I do not imagine that the announcement of the 17% tariffs going into effect on April 9th will meaningfully change the very close relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
All right. Thank you so much. CBS News security contributor Sam Vinograd. Always great to see you, Sam. All right, let's take another live look at the markets at this hour. Here's where we stand right now. The Dow currently down almost 300 points, and it's sort of been staying around that area for the past hour or so. But we saw at the open it slipped 3.1%. And we're on day 3 of the markets taking a nosedive as President Trump doubles down on his tariff agenda. Closing bell only 3 hours away right now. So joining us live is Market Watch senior markets reporter Joy Wiltermuth. Thank you so much for joining us, Joy. What's it going to take to ease investors' fears here and create some kind of stability in the market?
Well, it's going to take some kind of certainty on the trade front where we go from here on tariffs. And as you probably saw earlier in the session, there was a huge relief. Stocks went in the green and shot up when there was some talk of maybe a pause from the White House. The White House clamped that down and said that wasn't on the agenda. And then we also got more tariff on the tariff front, on the China front. So that's been the theme today. It's been huge swings, one of the most volatile days we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it was interesting over the weekend. Trump responded to the chaos in the markets by saying sometimes you need to take your medicine. I want to dive into that a little bit because what's the best case scenario to come out of this supposed trade war that we're seeing now?
Well, it depends who you ask, but if you do sort of chat with some people in the bond market, they would say that the damage hasn't been done yet. There's still time for there to be a negotiation for not the full penalty of all of the things that have been threatened to go through, but also we have to wait and see. Another thing besides just watching stocks zip around here today will be to see how the U.S. is obviously out there and will be selling more of its own debt, to see how those auctions go this week. Is there foreign demand or is there less of that? And what the appetite is to sort of buy American debt. Not even thinking about the tariffs and the price of goods, but, you know, what's the cost going to be for the U.S. to go out and borrow on the world markets will be in focus this week.
Yeah, it seems like the consensus, most of the advisors I've spoken to, is don't panic yet. But looking forward, what's the worst case scenario that could happen from all of this?
Well, the worst case scenario would be that we've seen this economy being driven by the wealthiest cohorts of the U.S., the wealthiest families, and they've been driving spending. And if they're spooked that they're going to have to pay a lot more in prices and they pull back, well, then you can quickly see the economy turn. Now, that's not showing up in the economic data yet. There's some concerns, but you know, that would be the thing that would be the damage that the bond market right now is saying we're not too late on. But once you start to see, you know, earnings come in more negatively, and we don't know what the earnings forward looking is going to be. Earnings kick off on Friday, but sort of the hard data reflecting the jitters people are feeling about tariffs, that's sort of then too late.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're seeing the immediate reaction to these tariffs, but you're seeing that from big business owners and small business owners. But what about 6 months from now? Which industries do you think could be greatly impacted the most down the road that maybe aren't necessarily directly impacted by trade?
Well, you would wonder what happens with the banks, right? Because, you know, if they are able to lend, if we're in a slowdown, it's a lot harder to lend. And then there's a concern perhaps about what kind of loans are on their books, how the consumer is doing, if people, you know, if there's layoffs. 6 months down the road, we will have a better view into how the economy is doing. Again, right now, it's the fears of what could be. And people in the market are saying there's time for it to turn around. But the more the uncertainty drags on, the fewer decisions big businesses, the titans of industry are willing to make in their own industry because they can't do the math. You know, what is this going to cost? They don't actually have the numbers because it seems we're still in the negotiation phase. The hope is we're still in negotiation phase.
Yes, I think that's the optimistic point of view, is hopefully this is all up for negotiation. We'll find out this week, I guess. Joy Wiltermuth, thank you so much. Well, coming up, the ultimate showdown. It's the Gators versus the Cougars. A new NCAA champ will be crowned tonight. Omar Villafranca has a preview of the final dance when we come back. You're watching CBS News 24/7. A new champion will carry the crown after tonight's final game of the 2025 NCAA men's tournament. CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca has a preview of the battle between the two college titans, the Florida Gators versus the Houston Cougars.
Two teams are left standing in the NCAA men's college basketball championship. Florida Gators will square off against the University of Houston Cougars. Both teams have All-Americans. Both are 1 seeds. Both teams shoot the three-pointer great, play great perimeter defense. Florida likes to run a little bit. Houston likes to slow it down. You also have the tale of two coaches. You have Todd Golden on one side with Florida, the young coach, old school Kelvin Sampson for Houston. Should be a 40-minute fight tonight to decide who is the best team in the land. Tip-off is at 7:50. We'll have all the highlights, but also keep in mind, we want to see who's going to be the most valuable player, but we all want to see the final montage at the end, the one shining moment montage that everybody tunes into. So we'll have all the highlights later on. Back to you.
I can't wait to watch that. Thank you, Omar. Well, some exciting hoops action beyond the college championships in Tampa and San Antonio. CBS News Colorado's Sarah Orbakowitz is in Denver, showing us a team that's always on the move with an eye on the future.
These
Nice shot.
are the sounds of March.
Popping the three.
And in Denver, Colorado, you can also expect to hear the clash of titanium.
We play basketball hard. You can put us up against probably an NBA team, and in our chairs, we've got a chance.
Meet Dan Hendricks and the rest of the Denver Rolling Nuggets, Colorado's national wheelchair basketball team.
Most people have 2 hands to use when they're playing basketball. Well, that's also what we're using for our legs, too. So as we're trying to propel ourselves forward, back, move around, we're also catching the ball, shooting the ball, passing the ball.
While players may pick and roll with ease, this year the team will have to miss out on nationals, still feeling effects from the pandemic.
We lost some sponsorships, we lost a lot of participation, so it set the program back several years. And right now we're really recruiting hard to try to regain the team.
Turning to teaching and creating the only kids practice team in the state.
It kind of gave me a realization that I'm not the only one, and that I'm kind of like, I have a group and I have people that I can be around and then just be myself.
After a car accident in 2023, Lucy began using a wheelchair. She found the Nuggets a few months later and never stopped moving.
They didn't really know what lay ahead for me and if I was ever going to be able to play on the playground with them. But I think after I found a basketball team and other sports that I really love, I was kind of like, okay, I'm okay. I can still do all these things.
Switch it. Watch out, go. And I know there's a lot more adults, children out there with disabilities that could benefit from playing sports. We want to bring the whole community together.
And you can still count on Lucy for that Cinderella story.
I'm like, okay, ready for the Paralympics or something. Like, let's do this.
Sarah Horbakowitz, CBS News, Denver.
Oh, what a great story. Wow, that was amazing to watch. All right, from the ultimate showdown in the basketball court to the ultimate stare down between a bald eagle and Noki the dog. It's part cute, part terrifying. We'll show you how it ended when we come back. You're watching CBS News 24/7. New video from just moments ago out of Kentucky, where folks there are dealing with massive flooding, turning some neighborhoods into rivers. I want to bring in Zoe Mintz to talk about where the storm is now, and then yet there's another storm headed their way, right?
Yeah, well, right now they are at least being able to pick up the pieces because this was the wettest 4-day period for western Kentucky on record, 14 to 15 inches since April 1st when that system began. And we are going to continue to see quite a lot more activity today, but luckily that system, at least, it's moving. It's been sitting over the central United States for the past week, and luckily now there's another storm system that is pushing it out of the way. The biggest threat over the next several hours is going to be the chance for severe weather. There's actually already been a confirmed tornado near Tallahassee, Florida, and that chance for severe weather continues to push east from Tallahassee, Florida, and the Panhandle all the way up through the Carolinas throughout this afternoon and into our early evening hours, as again, this storm system will continue to make its way farther and farther east over the next 24 hours, bringing widespread rain across the entirety of the East Coast. And then look up behind this system, snow, as much colder air will be making its way in on the back end of this system. That is really going to cool things down. So think all of the water that is currently on the roadways right now is going to be seeing this Arctic air moving in by early tomorrow morning. That is going to bring our temperatures very, very cold waking up. We will be in the 20s and 30s. So all of the water on the ground is going to freeze over as this system makes its way across the country. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a very slippery early morning commute across many places from the Midwest all the way down to the Mississippi Valley. Again, that will be waking up very early tomorrow morning. So this storm system, again, as it moves across the country, it is going to bring a bitter chill. Keep that in mind. Take it slow on the roadways early tomorrow morning and get ready for more rain by later next week. Back to you.
Zoe, thanks so much. Child star Jay North, famous for portraying television's Dennis the Menace, died in his Florida home after battling colon cancer. North starred as the mischief maker for 4 seasons starting in 1959. He was 73 years old. Well, last night's season finale of the hit HBO anthology series The White Lotus has a lot of people talking. Season 3, which took place at a luxury hotel in Thailand, opened with gunshots, and now viewers finally know what happened and who died. One of the season's stars, Walter Goggins, there he is, told CBS Mornings he had to keep the ending a secret for more than a year.
All of us, kind of being out in the world, had to had the good fortune of listen to people tell us their version of the story out on the street. Some of them got very close, but no one guessed it.
Ooh, lots of thoughts on this show. White Lotus has been renewed for a 4th season, but creator Mike White has not revealed where it will take place. And you gotta see this. A Washington family took this video of an intense stare down between our national symbol, the bald eagle, and their dog Noki. The bald eagle landed on their deck, and Noki tried to stand his ground behind the safety, of course, of that glass screen door. Take a look at this.
There's a bald eagle on our deck. Does it want to eat Noki?
It wants to, probably.
Could she carry our dog away?
Oh, hell yeah, she could.
Oh.
Yeah, the family thought the eagle could snatch up Noki if it had a chance, but a bald eagle can only typically lift about 3 to 4 pounds, so Noki was probably safe. All right, we got much more ahead here on CBS News 24/7. Any moment now, President Trump is set to hold a bilateral meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Our eyes on the White House today. You are watching CBS News 24/7.